But this is a new document?
That is a new
Yeah,
document.
it's really good.
Thank you.
It's great. Was it a different, was it within the city's?
Yeah, we came up with this ourselves.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And we
It's
did,
great. It's a
again,
whole
I
different
can't,
level.
I'm not taking any credit for this. I'm totally putting credit on the team, the data team. We had a group of employees who love to crunch data and look at data, and they started this document. We had Wesley Kern at Transit, who was amazing with formatting and providing the visual context. He did that part. And then we had several subject matter experts look at each section and provide their input. And so, I mean, I
It's a
think
cross-organizational group. Great.
completely cross-organizational effort.
Awesome.
So, but again, I would love your feedback on this going forward.
It's just got a level of narrative and fluency that's great.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go through each section. I'm just going to highlight each section. I'm not going to read the whole document to you, but we'll just highlight each section shortly. I just want to talk a little bit about the implementation progress of the 1820 strategic plan. We have the P3 core team. We actually have a new focus. We're working on a new charter, which is ongoing. And so we'll be looking at having more of an umbrella over all the innovation and all kind of the strategic planning efforts that are going on around the city.
Good.
So we're looking at that, and we're looking at expanding our group as well by a few people. And so it's a combination of lead team, mostly lead team, and then some other staff. So I think the P3 core team has some good focus coming into the future, especially as we start to look at the next strategic planning process, which we're going to have to think about this spring, because this strategic plan runs out this next fiscal year that we're planning right now. So we need to think about the 21-23 strategic plan, and we've already started talking about what that process might look like, and we'd like to obviously talk to you all about that once we get through the budget process moving forward. So, lead team organizational engagement. Of course, lead team has a very strong role in the strategic plan implementation. And we continue to work with them and with the organizational engagement overall. Scorecard build out is completed, so that's been online for some time now at charlottesville.org/data. That's also where you can see our open data and the efficiency study updates. There's a lot of different data at that website that if you haven't seen it in a while, there's some updates in there as well. Department work plans continue to be ongoing as well, and several of those are also at charlottesville.org/data. And they'll actually everybody's going to be updating the strategic plan scorecards and their department work plan scorecards by the end of this month. And so as soon as those are all updated, I'll let you all know when you can go and look at those. And then dashboards report on priority areas, which is the report in front of you, is completed. And there's the website.
I just have one question because I love this report as well, and I love the consistency in the formatting so that each section is dealing with the same categories of information. It's not clear how these are tied to the strategic plan goals, though. So each section, are you going to go into that?
Sure.
Because to me, this document reads more easily as a scorecard than the scorecard that's online, because the scorecard online is so big.
It's so big, and that's why we wanted to do this.
Okay.
So let me go back to this
good.
slide right here. So this is all the goals of the strategic plan and all the objectives. And
Okay.
so for instance, these 5 areas fit very nicely with, for instance, if you take economic development, goal 4, a strong, creative, diversified economy. And you see those objectives fit well with that. Priority workforce development, you can say the same thing. Safety and security under goal 2. Affordable housing under goal 1, and race and equity also under goal 1. So when we did these last year, we took careful care to make sure that they were aligned with goals and objectives in the strategic plan. And so
Great,
if we
yeah.
need to make that more clear in here,
I
we
think
can
that would
certainly
be
do
just
that,
helpful.
which would be helpful. And when we put the budget together, we'll make sure that's very clear where these and we did that in the 19 budget. We'll make sure that's very clear when we put the next iteration of this together, which will be partly in the budget document when you receive that in a few months.
Because the categories that are on this table of contents and up to the right here were kind of developed through last year's budget session. Like
Right.
we kicked
So
off
we
with
had
that
that retreat.
based on what we discussed as a council.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
So I'm going to start out with economic development, which is the first section. And I'm just highlighting a few of the main areas, and if you have any questions, let me know. So you have several charts in there that show gross receipts, and again, we tried to highlight what those areas were that our subject matter experts and we believed were indicative of what it meant to have, what economic development is and what it represents and how you can judge success or not. So in these 3 slides, you have business and professional services, restaurant and hotels and motels, and these are gross receipts. This is not revenue.
So this is, it contradicts the data that the CACVB has on hotels, where they had a dip of 3% in hotels from, I think, leveling, I think 1 quarter to, I think it was like the 3rd or 4th quarter this year compared with last year, or whatever it was, but this.
Are they looking regionally though?
It might be a different kind of metric they're
I
using.
think the metric that we're seeing when we go to the CACVB meeting is something called RevPAR,
Yes.
right? And they seem really concerned in there about what's the average rate that ends up getting charged per room. The fact is, we have more rooms online, they're more full, and we're making more revenue off of the hotel industry in this area. What CACVB is saying is, we'd like for them to be able to charge higher rates. That's how I interpret what that said, what is said in that meeting.
Yeah, but the interpretation there was different. I mean, they were making a different argument, which is that there's this depressed effect across the city of Charlottesville because of the reputations, and that's not what this would show. So this, I mean, notwithstanding that, this contradicts that interpretation of their data. So I think we need to make sure, I mean, especially Councilor Galvin and I are on that, or you are on the board right now, so we need to make sure that they're getting this, because this is important
And our
information.
revenue also doesn't, I mean, I haven't seen the data you're talking about, but there's a chart on page 3 that just talks about our revenue, and that also is growing. I mean, and
Yeah.
it has been going up, and Chris Ingles here too, and if he
Or
can speak to
Mr. Divers may want to talk about it. Chris could certainly.
Speak to the red bar issue, but I mean, the dollars.
So just for, excuse me, clarification from Mr. Signer's point, and then even what I'm hearing from you all, we've seen an increase not only in business and personal services, professional services, but restaurant dollars, hotel and motel dollars. And I see, well, I won't talk about what's on the next slide, but specifically from restaurant and hotel, we're seeing an uptick, not a decrease.
That's right. Correct.
Yeah, that's,
And that reflects in our revenue as well that we're collecting.
yeah. People are still coming, people are
So-
still spending.
These are all good signs.
Yeah.
Great.
So this is the gross receipts of our tax receipts? Or is it their
I think it's their gross receipts.
Their gross receipts,
The
okay.
revenue is subject to tax.
Okay.
Right. It's a big
Wow.
Because again, that was, as you recall, the big issue in 2015 was raising the meals tax
Right.
1 cent,
Mhm.
and that was viewed as going to be cutting into business. And again, this demonstrates that did not happen.
Like at all.
Yeah, but I mean, I want to make sure
Yeah.
that this wasn't showing our tax receipts
Gotcha.
going up.
Remember, we put in
This is
that,
showing their receipts
yeah,
going
remember we
up.
put in that caveat, I can't remember exactly.
Yes,
what
it was.
said, and we didn't have to apply that.
Yeah, and
so-
I was one that put
Right,
that caveat in
exactly.
there.
So,
Yeah.
thank goodness,
I'm
yeah,
glad
we
we
did not
didn't
have to
use it.
apply that, so,
A sunset.
the sunshine, that's right. Okay, just moving on to vacancy rates, and this is another indicator that we wanted to highlight. And you can see that this is the city of Charlottesville, and comparing with national, which we're well below as of 2017. And then we have the citywide central district and downtown areas of the city. So again, these are all going in the right direction, continuing to stay lower, much lower than the national.
But at some point, it's too low, and we want to make sure we have supply. So like, what is that sweet spot, Mr. Engel?
That's the too low right now.
Yeah.
Especially downtown, at 2%, that's essentially, there's no space for anybody to expand. But there are several projects that are in the pipeline that will fix that over the next 2 years, 3 years. 2 of them are working on already, so we'll see some new commercial space come online, which will help that. But at 2%, that's painful.
Which I think, again, highlights the need for the economic development efforts that their office are putting forth to. This is a double-edged sword, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, so. For sure. These are just representing permits and how they have also been strong over the past, since 2000, this shows 2013 to 2017. And then the last slide, favorable economic perceptions, that's from our National Citizen Survey. We just received the results for 2018, which we're now reviewing the draft of those. So my hope is to have something to you when we put the budget out in early March to show you the results. So we'll actually have 4 years of data. I know this only shows 2. We'd have a 2012 survey as well. They just did not ask these questions in 2012. So the 3 questions here are favorable perceptions for overall economic health, economic development, which is the middle line, and cost of living. So realizing the cost of living here is high, but the favorable perception of economic development has grown, and the overall economic health has pretty much stayed the same. So we'll see what 2018 says, and all these, actually, we have, every single one of these priority areas has something from the National Citizen Survey that we're featuring as well. So it's just good information to have. And then we wanted to highlight a major initiative or 2, and in this case, we're highlighting the Minority Business Program, which is a joint program with the Office of Economic Development and Procurement. And last fiscal year, or for the fiscal year 19 budget, a Minority Business Development Coordinator was added to OED, which complements the position in procurement. And these, you can read here what the business program will do, some of the accomplishments they've had. They have a task force that's holding regular meetings. They've formally launched the program, and their efforts have included the Black Business Expo and the Charlottesville Women Minority Business Expo, which I went to, and that was amazing. That was an incredible expo. So really enjoyed that. Met a lot of great people. Very, very vibrant day. So, okay, any other questions for economic development before we move on to workforce development?
Thank you.
Okay. Tied closely to economic development is workforce development. And again, this is one that's kind of a double-edged sword as well with the unemployment rate. Because again, just like having not much space to go when there's a low unemployment rate, then businesses have a difficult time finding people. And so there's employer services that need to occur. And again, Mr. Engel, if you have specific questions about those, he could answer questions on that. But still, and then I'll talk a little bit later about how the unemployment rate differs, obviously, between with African American community. We'll talk about that at the end under race and equity. So the Charlottesville line is obviously the lowest line, and we're well below the state or the metropolitan statistical area. This is from the Orange Dot report. So this is some of the bigger data we pulled in this area. And so what this represents, and while the unemployment rate is low, we still have families who are struggling in the community, and these charts are representing by income number of struggling families. And so you can see for the lowest income, it's almost 600 families. And so we still have, and that has grown actually in the past several years in terms of the 2018 data when you compare it to 2015. So we should not diminish any of our efforts in this area for workforce development, certainly. And while we have a lot of great initiatives, which I'll talk about on a slide or two, we still need to make sure we're helping as many folks as possible get self-sustaining jobs and making incomes where they can sustain.
Leslie, is one way to interpret this, because the population has stayed, I mean, it's increased some, but if you have this fall off in the number of families in the 15,000 to 24, that bracket, but then this increase in the 2 much lower brackets, that those folks have started making less income over the last, so you have an increase?
So we did think, we thought about that. A couple of ways we thought about that, and that was one way, was are we seeing more families moving in these income brackets that are struggling? are they moving around income brackets? And that's certainly something we would need to dig deeper in to kind of figure out.
If I could throw in, because I looked at that and relative to the RCLCO study that was done in 2015 that did a lot more work on commute patterns, I'm thinking that that's the category that can't afford to live here but work here. You know, because that's more and more people in that category of income can't afford to live in the city.
You're talking about the 15 to 25?
And so that's going down simply because they're not living here anymore.
Oh.
And so that's, I mean, I think we need to probe that.
I
But
agree.
I have a feeling when I referenced the RCLCO study that that might be the
Where does this data come from?
correlation.
So
from.
this is the orange dot report.
But
We
how
can,
where do
we-
they get it? Do-
census data.
Census.
We can, and I,
For the
we,
city.
correct.
This is
But
specific
Yes.
to
the
the
census
city.
is only isn't the census data only once every
10 years.
10 years? So how,
They just got it in 2017, I think.
Yes, but they do an update, that's annually, on some
right.
key items, which is where they pull these up.
I think some of you have seen the report, but we'd be happy to send it out, send these
Mhm.
reports out again.
But it is something that's
It's something to look at
disconcerting.
for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So one indicator, or one question I have rather in regards to the number of families and why it has risen. I think the point that you made in regards to new families moving in, with the IRC being rather popular, and then making a much more concerted effort to bring in as many families as possible, and many of them are placed in different neighborhoods within the city. Do you think that may attribute to it?
It could, yeah, I don't know for sure.
I mean, that's not
Yeah,
the
I
sole
mean-
reason, obviously, but
Mhm.
I think it plays.
I think it's worth figuring out what it
Yeah.
means for sure.
But that data, you probably can't track individual households through time. It's like you're gonna see this aggregate, so it's hard to kind of show like what is happening at that household level for trends. I'm pretty sure that that's how that data is aggregate. So I think there's gonna be some limitations with this
Yeah.
type of data.
Well, and we are the locality in the whole Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission region and the Thomas Jefferson Health District that is providing a lot of resources for affordable housing.
Yeah.
And
So everyone comes here.
When you look at the
Charlotte,
TJ, the Thomas Jefferson Health Department's report, the Maps to Health, we provide 8 times more public and assisted housing than any other member in the community. When you look at other data, we spend about $120 per capita on affordable housing compared to the county of Albemarle that spends 20.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
this is also something you have to look at.
Yeah. If you want help, go to Charlottesville.
And that's why we gotta have regional approaches.
Yeah. I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean,
No, I think,
but the
it's a
regional
sign that,
approach,
but
yeah.
the regional approach has got to start kicking in because, it's a
We can't do it
regional
alone.
problem.
I wonder also, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point and just stay on this, but when individuals are receiving training, and I mean, I know we do a ton of workforce development training through our different programs, initiatives, whatnot. Even when you first get your job, you don't have, or that's not immediately reflected in your income in regards to like data tracking purposes. So if a person goes through GoDriver, for example, and then if they go through it in February, they start working for CAT in June. I mean, it's not immediate that you're going to see in the data that that their salary went from maybe $12,000 when they weren't working to now, $25,000, $30,000, $40,000. So I think we have to keep that in mind. Or if people bounce around jobs, that also plays a role. I'm very proud of our workforce development initiatives, and I know obviously we still have a lot of work to do, but I just think for people who are here and may see this and like, oh, well, what the heck is going on? Like, make sure that we tell the full story because there's
And
Right.
the other charts in
Yeah.
this do
A lot of
help
pieces
tell
to the
that,
pie.
but we didn't want to diminish the fact that we have workforce development programs that are working, but we
Mhm.
still have a lot of work to do.
Yes, ma'am.
So that was really the point of this,
Yeah.
or recognizing that.
And I appreciate you taking that perspective. Like that takes a lot of
So-
I think
gall.
one of the other takeaways we want to have here is, over the span of the years that this is measuring, right?
Mhm.
There's roughly the same number of people or families that are below $35,000 in the city. The city experienced over 12% growth during that time, though. So I think you have to appreciate that workforce development initiatives did
gotcha.
help, right? Because folks, about the same number of families stayed in this category. The part that's concerning to me about the slide is that roughly the same number of people are below 35,000 when you add up all the columns in 2011 as in 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a big shift in the number of people who are between 0 and 15,000 in income. And so what's happening there, that there are people in the very lowest brackets and that is increasing over
Right.
time.
But it would be, I mean, your point is that there's another possible graph where it could show the percentage of people under $35,000 as a percentage of the total population in Charlottesville would decrease over this period of time. Would have
Since
gone-
these are raw counts and
because
there's
the population has gone up 10.
Yeah, that's a very
ballpark
good
of 2,000 families in 2011, 2018. We can't see the actual numbers here, but I'm adding up columns based on the left-hand side there. If that's true, and we grew over that time by over 4,000 people, right, then I think that also, there is a good message in here too.
Yes, yes.
That workforce development, that there are people working.
Because if you look, I mean, I know that CIC has, I think they have, I mean, the figures now for some of these programs having been in effect for several years, there are, I think CIC has helped, it's like over 100 businesses have gotten started, and you see the business creation numbers and later, and then the workforce, I mean, there are numbers in the hundreds of people who have been helped through these programs that we're investing in.
Great. These are all great. This is great discussion and feedback, so this is very helpful.
So I guess percentages of the population would be another helpful indicator then, not just total numbers. Because if the percentages of people in these lower brackets is going down
Right.
or staying the same, then our workforce, it's a good sign for our workforce, but we gotta do better. But if it's going up as well as our population's going up, it's another whole kettle of fish.
So under community perceptions, again, this comes from the National Citizen Survey. These are the 3 data points that we have. So residents with a favorable view of employment topics, of the employment opportunities that actually grew in 2016. Place to work actually declined slightly, not very much though. And then progress on stable employment's pretty much stayed the same. So again, I think this can be positive and negative, depending on how you look at it. So again, I think it shows that our workforce development programs, could be working, or at least keeping folks stable, as mentioned before, as new folks come into the area or people are moving around income brackets. So again, we'll see what 2018 has to show for this when we start plugging that data in to this.
So Leslie, may I ask one question?
Sure.
So, do you think this indicates that we need a variety of different jobs, like we need some kind of industry to come in that provides a different market, or do we need to encourage folks to create different jobs? Because the ones that we have, maybe for people who may not have all the skills to get the tech jobs or whatnot, do we need to try and encourage that? How do we address this? How do we make individuals have a more favorable view in terms of employment topics? Because from what I hear often from people who may be on maybe the bottom ladder of the ringer, is you only have a couple of places to work, at UVA, or maybe be a custodian somewhere at Aramark in the food service industry. But there's not really a lot of variety if you don't have a lot of skills. So I don't really know I'm not saying you have the answers. I'm just
Okay.
thinking.
I'm
Yeah,
going
we
to
are.
look to somebody else to answer that question. I think those are all great things to consider. I'm not the expert in this, however,
Yeah.
so
Or maybe
One thing
Chris.
I can offer is that this community has always kind of had a lack or a low spot in terms of middle skilled job opportunities.
Mhm.
We've got kind of a lot of the low end, a lot of the high end, a little bit in the middle. And that's for a lot of reasons. I mean, we were never a factory town.
Right.
Which is a good thing because we never lost the factory when we went away. But we don't kind of have a lot of opportunity for middle skilled growth. So as you kind of move up the ladder, there's kind of a
Yeah.
It's really tricky to solve because the way you get those type of opportunities here, you have to show you have the workforce, you have to show you have the land, and things like that. And costs are higher, so if somebody is going to start a factory, they're likely not going to look at Charlottesville or even Alcorn County.
Right.
So once again, regionally, as we grow the overall economy regionally, people have opportunities even a little farther afield. That's good. Gives them that opportunity, kind of creates a transportation challenge. So it's not an easy, there's not an easy answer. And the microphone's not going to help me give you an even better one, but sorry. Help on TV. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
But that's what I would say about that.
I know that there's been some, when we had our minority business roundtable breakfast a couple weeks ago, a couple folks came to me saying that there's been interest in how do you create that kind of industry, even if it's not on a large scale. So how do we have space for folks to expand on like local barbershops, right? Because that's something that it's a skill that you can learn, but that you can also make a pretty nice income on with a certain amount of training, but there's not a lot of space here in the city to be able to help with that. So I mean, or to move that needle. I heard some people talking about making or starting a business with making the not cabinets. Well, yeah, the cabinets as well as the door things like in your kitchen. What do you call those things? What is it? Hardware for the door. Yeah, like that. Like just different industries that you can accumulate skills, but I wonder how do we accumulate income, but how do we as a city help facilitate that? Like how do we help folks start those industries to move this needle in terms of income and employment and something that's sustainable?
If I may
Question.
add,
Sure.
one of the recommendations in the strategic investment area plan was to build a flex space and then to bring in the Charlottesville Economic Development Authority to then provide kind of long-term to leases, but then sublet to small businesses within that space so that it was less expensive. It gets down to needing to build that space.
Well, build it. Okay.
And we don't have that kind of space. The second thing that was born out of that initiative was there's a big thrust at one point to do flash freezing.
Yeah.
And I know I've asked this about several times about Chris, what happened to that? They actually got a grant, but then the person that was leading the charge on that leave the area. So, but this has been looked at and discussed a while, and we do need the space. They can't find the industrial space.
Yeah.
Another thing that's come up over the years is light manufacturing. And the
Yeah.
question would be, because if you look, I mean, remember when we were running for council, it was like the goal, on top of all these other really good ideas, would be to bring employers to the area who could create in significant chunks jobs for people who don't have college degrees, maybe not even high school degrees, but who can be trained. And light manufacturing is one of those categories, but you need an employer who's at scale, who can say, I'm going to create 35 jobs or 50 or whatever, and they are economically mature enough that they could finance the manufacturing facility, but manufacturing is not as big as older assembly plants because you're putting together, like in Stanton, there's a razor factory, I think, that's on this model. And I think the question would be, is there, now that if we've identified that part, would there be a way that we could support the office strategically to try and bring in at scale sustainable jobs? Because then somebody can be at that employer for 10 years or 15 years, they can build a career there. And the employer is sustainable. And the thing with small businesses is they're very unstable a lot of the time. And you got to deal with competition. You got to everybody's not cut out to be an entrepreneur or to run a small business. You got to do your own payroll. You got to benefits.
So you're
all this
talking
stuff.
like an industrial
Light manu-
incubator.
Not an incubator.
That's
I think
already
bringing
existing,
in-
bringing
bringing
someone
in an
that's
existing
established.
employer
but
and saying,
I
hey,
think you could try both, sure. But
Sure,
it's
they're
hard
not-
to get someone interested to come here when there's already a place like Stanton with lower costs.
And
That's part of it. If you look at our zoning, about 3% of our land is in industrial, where that light manufacturing could potentially live.
so
So we
maybe
have
we
very
should change
limited,
that. I mean,
very
maybe
limited
that's something that-
opportunity. And you know, that's a challenge. So they're likely going to look, based on cost and availability, they're going to look elsewhere. And that's just the nature of cities. It's not just Charlottesville. Other places are experiencing that to some extent. And, you know, the driving forces in the economy here now are, you know, around people want to live in an urban environment. So residential is driving it as opposed to business, you know.
Well, I guess so I know that we renewed the technology zone and the 50% tax credit for tech businesses. And I think that if there was any incentive that we could support that would bring in those kinds of jobs, so specifically people who don't have college degrees, that we could create in larger quantities with sustainable employers. Because one of the things about Charlottesville compared to Stanton is people want to live in cities like Charlottesville now. So there's this huge upside to the attractiveness of creating jobs in cities like Charlottesville. So it is more expensive per square foot, but one of the things that, I don't know whether under Virginia law we have any additional tools available to us for light manufacturing as compared to tech, because the whole city is a tech zone, but I would be very interested in knowing about that as we go into this year.
And could we get a handle on the number of people that we're talking about that would benefit from this kind of activity? So we can know the scale of industry we need? Like, is there a way to know that? Because we know that we've got a third of our families are still below the poverty level, but a lot of them are female heads of household. Because the other thing to talk about, if you want to bring down the cost of living, is early childhood daycare. That's hugely important with regards to helping people have more income in their pocket. So and in fact, way back when we had the Batten intern doing research for us, that was the biggest bang for the buck if we provided citywide subsidized childcare. That would be the very biggest benefit to more people in poverty, because it's $9,000 to $12,000 a year to pay for good childcare. So we're talking about trying to bring in more industry and so on and so forth, but I think that that's the other angle to look at. Reduce costs of our families.
It's a multifaceted approach,
Yeah.
for sure.
And I know that we've got the Early Childhood Development Task Force that's been working a lot on that. And Mike, you've been working on that. Do you think we could get a presentation, an update from them before council at some point?
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
And because yeah, both ends, you know,
Yeah.
reduce personal household costs, but also provide higher paying jobs.
So just to wrap up workforce development, the major initiative, you all are very familiar with this, obviously, the Downtown Job Center and the GO programs. In the lower level, the Central Library, since its inception, I think it's about 4 years old, it's had almost 7,000 visitors, offering a variety of services to them. And GO programs, we know, are pre-employment skills training to individuals in high-demand industries. And since the inception, 139 city residents have graduated, and of that 131 were offered better jobs from the employer partners, averaging at least $15 an hour. So that's something to celebrate.
Really
for
good.
sure.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
So that means
Outstanding.
139 households of the households that are in poverty. I mean, I'm just trying to tie that together with the other metric that we're trying to track, which is reduction of poverty. Is there any way we can start doing that? Because I mean, that's the thing, is trying to figure out how are we reducing
metric.
the other numbers we looked at, which is the growing numbers of people with low income. And then this is showing us that we know we've got 139 households at least that have gotten out of the very low income, but I'm not sure how that's relating to the other number.
Okay.
But I think it's nuanced though, because I mean, so for example, if an individual lives in public housing and when they go from possibly having no job to now getting a job that costs $15 an hour, your rents also increase. So, I mean, some individuals, although they have a new job, they're still living in poverty because the assistance that they were getting before, i.e. the child care assistance or maybe just some
You're
other,
absolutely right.
food stamps or
absolutely
whatnot goes away, and it makes it tougher.
That's why
So
the child care and stuff like that is critical.
yeah. But sorry to damper. Like this is a really
No, I
really
mean, I
good
think
slide.
that
I
gets-
don't. Yeah, I don't want
Alvin's
to.
point about the wraparound services that are still
Yeah.
absolutely necessary for these families that are
Yeah.
trying to become self-sufficient. So.
We want to be very clear. This is a.
Yes, thank
this
you
is a
very- this is
very
great.
Those are all
very
great
good
points.
thing.
I
And it was
Yeah.
really good to get it in this format.
Well,
I just cannot thank you enough.
Appreciate your feedback. All right, any other questions or comments about workforce development before we move on to the next section?
Do you just one last question?
Sure.
Let me stop saying one last question because I'm not
Yeah,
gonna have
okay.
the last question.
Totally.
In regards to the Go programs, do we? Is there any way we could possibly like get a schedule for which ones we may offer coming up, just so that we can know? And I think it may behoove us if we know in advance, like, hey, in February we're gonna do Go Driver, in April we're gonna
Yeah, we
do
could get the
Go
word out.
Electric. Like it may help in terms of getting the word if we plan them in advance. I know that's it's
I'll
kind of
let
challenging, but
Yeah,
Is that
so just,
possible?
we can let you know about the ones that are in the works right now, and there are a couple, but the way the Go programs work is they're based on demand. So
Yeah.
when we recognize and realize the demand that employer has, and we work backwards to create the training and lead folks into those
Makes
jobs.
sense.
So to the extent that we have a year's worth planned out, we don't.
Yeah,
We
right.
have a couple coming up over the next couple months. We're actually looking at one right now that is focused on the solar industry, and we have an employer
Great.
that has a significant need to hire some solar
Mhm.
That's
construction-related
fantastic.
jobs. And of course, Go Driver is going to happen again. Go Cook is about to happen again for the
Yeah.
third time, starting next week. So
yeah.
those
So
are the
it's
ones
like
that are
those three.
immediately in the works, but throughout the year, we'll evolve into others as demand
Thank you.
materializes.
And I think you're absolutely right. Like it makes perfect sense. You don't want to say, "Hey, in October we're doing Go Electric," when we know we don't have, or we may not know we have the jobs at the end of the Go to place the people in, and then you're giving them false hope. So
That's
you're right.
fantastic about Go Solar, though.
Thank you. Yeah,
That's
Go
great.
Solar is gonna be good.
That's great.
Okay, great. Hello? It's not working. Okay, there we go. Moving on to safety and security, just a few, did I skip one? No, okay. Just a few items to highlight in terms of, just wanted to highlight, I know traffic has been an issue, obviously. This highlights that traffic incidents have actually gone down over the past several years, property crime and violent crime. Violent crime stayed pretty much the same, and property crime has been decreasing. And then in terms of the fire department, these are their incidents, and you can see that last line is fire. So most of what they do is, you see the green line is EMS, and the other is other stuff like hazmat, other type, I don't know if you have specific questions about that, but it's kind of everything else, weather-related calls, calls canceled before units arrived, and things like that, which is, it's still a large number. That's a big chunk of what they're doing as well. So obviously, last year, the EMS cost recovery was implemented, and so that is becoming, or has been for a while, and it's formally recognizing the fact that EMS is a major function of the fire department, and that we needed a more collaborative and concentrated effort in that area, which is one reason we did the revenue recovery to do that. So again, these are just indicators of what they're doing. Again, their business is not necessarily putting out fires right now. Hasn't been for a while.
Good job, Chief Baxter.
Under the perceived resident safety, this is again from the citizen survey, 2012 through 2016. While positive feelings about feeling safe in the neighborhoods and safe downtown, overall feeling of safety is a little bit lower. But again, we'll see what this plays out for 2018. Sometimes they say perception of everything. It is everything. It doesn't matter what the data says. If the perception says one thing, then that's usually what is regarded as truth. So anyway, this is just an interesting metric to look at and consider going forward in terms of knowing how people feel about relative safety in the city. And then the major initiative we have is the Committee on Safety and Emergency Preparedness, founded about a year ago, and it's charged with creating the framework for the city's emergency management programs. And our mission is to reduce the community, citizen, and employee vulnerability to all hazards, natural and man-made. Some of the successes include the emergency building evacuation placards, which you've probably seen around city buildings. We directed a cybersecurity assessment of IT infrastructure, directed a completion of safety and security system at the downtown mall, and been coordinating training classes for employees. Any questions about
Yeah,
that?
before we
Yes,
leave
ma'am.
this area, and I know Chief Baxter knows that I need to talk to him about this, but looking at the line graphs regarding the fire department's incidents by type, and it does look like the responding to fires has actually kind of stayed the same, and it's a relatively low percentage. Is that changing the department's decisions about what vehicles it's going to be purchasing over time? And that relates to size of vehicles, which relates to size of roads, and relates to a lot of other issues that are in conversation today with regards to street design standards. And I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up.
Sure. So what we're seeing in Charlottesville in terms of incident workload in the structure fire environment is consistent with what you see around the country. It's about 3 or 4% of our workload. It's really important to remember, though, that the number of incidents is not the only way to measure or evaluate the risk, right? So these are what we call a house fire or building fire is a high-risk, low-frequency, non-discretionary time event, meaning who we have on duty that moment and the equipment they have and the training they have and the leadership they have is what you have when that house catches on fire, whether it's once a year or 100 times a year. So it's just looking at it from that prism of the total number of calls as a percentage of our total workload can be a little bit misleading. So in terms of the size of the apparatus, we have another pumper on order right now that's being manufactured in the same style and design of Engine 5 and Engine 7, which we brought on board in 2015, and we did a presentation. I think you were there.
Mm-hmm.
We worked with, we set up a mock traffic zone down by Friendship Court, as a matter of fact. And those are about as small and tightly designed. There's a couple designs out there that are a little bit smaller. There's been some work done in San Francisco, which is a community that obviously has, to an even greater degree than we do, the same challenges. So we are looking at that. We are paying attention to it. But as an all hazards department, one thing that's a sort of a second cautionary tale is people will often compare the U.S. Fire Service to some of the European cities that do have much smaller apparatus. It's important to remember that they also have a separate rescue service and a separate EMS service. So if the community decided at some point that it wanted to go down that road for those other very logical reasons, that's fine, but there would be significant cost associated with that.
Okay.
I just want to add, in terms of smaller apparatus, like the rigs, the fire trucks and things like that, there has to be some kind of adjustment on the other side of the regulation. The building code needs to change. In other words, the fire department may require that all buildings, whether it's a single family, multi-family, or what have you, have a sprinkler system. So if you give in one section of the requirement, then you have to up on the other side of.
Sure.
We did discuss that at the place design task force meeting.
I got there late yesterday, but I knew that was a big topic. Thank you.
So I have a question about the amount of resources that we're putting in public safety. Are we funding at this level because of perception? Then if the data looks like that crimes have been pretty steady? So why are we?
Something specific?
So for example, if the data shows that there's not an increase in crimes, but we're spending, last year we spent money on the downtown study. If there hasn't been a decrease in the amount going towards public safety. I remember sitting in one of the meetings with Neil Goodlow, and I couldn't really understand, and still don't, why we're still sending the same amount of resources to the jail if those numbers are down and have stayed that way. So are we looking at why we're still sending how much overall are we spending on public safety? I don't have the budget book
Overall?
from last year.
So the police budget's around, I mean, you're talking about in total,
Mil-
14 million for the police department budget around, and what's your,
12.5.
okay.
Mhm.
And then the jail receives about 6 million.
Okay.
I would say this for the downtown mall, that wasn't a study to look at crime, that was a study to look at the infrastructure on the mall. And Andrew, you're gonna explain that a little bit more, or Paul, to look at the aspects of the mall that are infrastructure related in terms of the safety and security of the downtown mall space, not looking at the crime occurring.
But that conversation did start happening in the city after the,
2017.
yeah, well, not before
Oh.
then, right?
Oh, about people feeling unsafe on the mall?
Unsafe,
Mhm. It was-
cameras,
Mhm.
lighting.
Correct, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, one thing I would say, at least from the fire department perspective, I can't speak for the police, but we haven't had a fire fatality in the city of Charlottesville since 2009, which is pretty unique for a population density and a community that has buildings and structures that are as old as that we have, and the incredible mix of the types of structures we have. So I'd be cautious about again linking the number of incidents to the risk. Like the outcomes that we're having now are related to that sustained investment over time.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
if you
Yes.
begin to pull away at that, you're going to see some change in outcomes.
But at the
And-
same time, we should be looking at whether this is the best investment. So it's not necessarily pulling away, like what can we sustain and still make sure that people are safe? But, and I'm specifically talking in terms of crime
Yeah.
here, if we haven't seen an increase, this data is from, did it say 2012? So 2008, this data shows that either steady or a decrease, and I think that's just something we should look at, just where dollars are going, and if it's a better investment in, prevention measures like the school system, some of these, assisting programs that, we were talking about, like childcare and things like that. I just don't think it hurts to actually know and look at, like, if there's some way that the investment could be made. And I guess that's a conversation that would, if Chief Brackney was here, that we may be able to have a fuller discussion.
Sure, I think that's a fair
Right.
discussion to have.
Right, so like we're seeing these trends now for quite some time of crime going down, traffic accidents going down, and the violent crime staying steady. At some point, I think the mayor's point is well taken. At some point, do you take stock and say, we can pull back a little bit? And I don't know how long that trending is supposed to be.
Like, that's not messy.
Chief gave us the people's eyebrow like The Rock just now. Like, no way.
So, I mean, we can pull back on that investment in the crime because we're looking now that we've succeeded, but, what's that sweet spot? Because you don't want to take the resources away and then all of a sudden it all starts spiking again.
But I'm really interested in the perceived perception of safety versus, so that tells me that we need to do something there.
Oh.
And
And if
again,
we're funding things based on the perception of safety versus what is actually happening.
Huh.
So
Because the
then,
data indicates that it's a relatively safe city. I mean, very safe. Right? Is that what you?
and if people don't feel safe, then why don't they feel
yes.
safe?
Yeah.
And to answer that question.
You all may remember, years ago, we had a meeting down in Carver, and we
Yes.
had work groups, and it was all about the downtown mall, and what should the physical plant look like, what do people think about safety, and all these other things. And we had the data trends then. But I think that significant events that have happened on the downtown mall, or, you know, national news stories, and for a lot of people, you know, it's hard for me for the amount of time and what sector I come out of, but a lot of people feel very threatened by the fact that we have panhandling on the mall. You know, I think it is out of scale with what the actual threat is, but it doesn't change how people feel about it. We would have to do a lot more in talking about this in order to change perception, is I guess the point. I don't think that the actual safety or status of the mall has changed much. But I do think that people haven't changed their thoughts about whether it's safe that much. I do think that there's some physical plant things that need to happen. Lighting could clearly be better for sure. There's some key spots that need to be addressed. But most of the perception is driven by people's feeling of safety about folks that maybe aren't exactly like them on the mall, whether that's panhandlers or sometimes in the summertime, there's usually a spike in calls to the manager's office about young people being disruptive while people are eating, things like that that are about people's values or ways of thinking about folks who are a little bit different from them being on the mall.
If I may ask too, somewhat related to that, and I can't remember where we stood on it the last budget cycle, but there was a lot of conversations about having a 24-hour public restroom, some public facility for the people that are homeless or panhandling, because that was also another concern, that there was no place for them to go, and that it was impacting quality of life issues for the rest of the community that lived in the downtown area. So, and I know we got to the point where we were looking at like a Portland model, and is that something we can bring up again, or is it, where are we on that?
We can. I will say that we've looked at that from a number of different angles. I believe the CIP that we proposed actually does not fund that any longer, because as we've looked at what are the potential locations for something like that, and what's the potential impact, it's not the staff assessment that there's a place to do that.
I think we also have to be careful about the, you know, people having the ability to occupy a space versus is the perception there simply because they're present. And then that comes back to education, and that people need to change mindsets versus, removing people out of having them be away from the area so other people feel comfortable.
I think that there is a unhealthy stigma associated with people who are sitting on the mall and characterized as homeless by the general population when they are often not. As somebody who's worked a lot in that field of homelessness, I think is really harmful.
I just looked up what the 2018 results were, and actually everything went up. So the overall feeling of safety went from 69 to 76%. Safe in neighborhood jumped all the way up to 94%, and safe downtown commercial areas at 90%. So everything has improved, actually.
In 2018,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So,
Great.
So, this is a great discussion. And the other aspect of this in previous surveys was between 2014 and the 16 was Hannah Graham, and we think that also influenced some of the responses for those years, given that that was such a high-profile case and it happened on the downtown mall. So, but anyway, so I wanted to look that up, and since I'd mentioned that, so.
And that's great that those trends are up. I would just say that perception is a reality, and that if the perception is that our business districts are unsafe, then I know many people in the county who are saying, I'm not going to be in the city's business
Right.
districts. That actually does have an effect on our revenues. And so,
Absolutely.
you know, there is a cost associated with that perception if it's a poor perception.
Yeah, I agree. And
But
that's
the
why
data
we
shows
think that's an
otherwise, though,
important
like-
metric. Excuse me,
I said, I'm sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
agree with Dave.
Sorry.
I'm just saying, but still, the perceptions are a reality for many people, regardless of the data. And so we can't ignore that perception if it means they're not coming.
Yeah,
Regardless if we say that there's no crime. If their perception is that there's a lot of crime, and I've just heard it from people who live out in the county, like, I'm not coming downtown anymore, and I'm not going to let my children be down, my teenagers down there. That's the reality for some people because it's the perception. So I just feel like ignoring that is a mistake.
No, I would agree. I don't think we should ignore it, but I think, again, as Mr. Murphy, I think as and Mayor Walker and others have said, we have to be careful with,
What we feed, I guess.
yeah, because I feel like I hear or I read some of those comments online from people who say, I'm boycotting Charlottesville. I'm never spending another dollar there because of X, Y, or Z. But truth be told, some of those folks, they're looking for reasons to not come here. They'd much rather go to Stonefield Commons or whatever, right? And that's fine with them. But then secondly, if because that we are dealing with different issues, that makes you not want to come to our city, then that's something that you have to do.
That's
with.
different than crime as a perception. I'm talking specifically about perception of safety. I'm not talking about perception of other. There's a lot of
we've
other
seen
reasons
very
they are
clearly
mad
that
about
crime is down. I mean, I hear you.
I
I'm
know.
not trying. I don't want to.
I get the reality. I'm just saying perception is also reality when it comes to people's behaviors, and that affects our economic indicators.
So I'm wondering if this is just pointing to the fact that we need to do a better job of presenting our story.
Yeah.
Because we have a very good story right now with crime going down and other things going up. We don't want to sugarcoat anything, but at the same time, we want to make sure we're giving a fair appraisal and projection of our city. I'm not sure how you do that. I'm looking at Brian Wheeler. But it's,
Fix it, Brian.
Well, and Leslie's got brand new data here.
Yeah,
so
that's fantastic.
As we have that ready to share, that'll give us an
We can put
opportunity
that
to make
together.
those
Yeah.
points.
Okay. Ready to move on?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Affordable housing. So I know we've talked about this a lot in the last several months, so I don't know how much time we need to spend on it. So just a few key data points wanted to share. There's a lot more in the report, obviously. Residents whose housing is cost burdened. This shows calendar year 12 through 16. Cost burdened is anyone paying higher than 30% gross income for housing. On the next slide, it shows supported affordable units that have been built in the city. The goal being, several years ago, the goal being 15% of the total housing stock, and according to this, we're at around 10% of that goal. And I know there's a lot of effort right now, obviously, to figure out how to address affordable housing comprehensively, and I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the initiative section. Under the continuum of housing, this discusses the rentals and ownership. So again, we have, quite a mix of the continuum of housing, and this just shows what that breakdown is. And again, you've seen a lot of this data before and talked
so
about it.
we have a lot of affordable rentals. Is that what I'm reading?
I'll let Alex.
Not enough. However, I think in the past, you see, we don't have what we call affordable housing development, some kind of portfolio system. But with the discussion City Council is having right now, and the capacity building that is being provided to the Housing Authority, coupled with PHA. So what we're going to be looking at in the future is this portfolio system. In other words, every year there is a major development that is going on that will result in affordable housing. For instance, PHA They've got about, I think their project is about 4 phases, maybe 3, you know. So once they go into construction, as the project is completed, every other year they will have a project initiated. So with that kind of program and phased implementation, you know, I think the city will be able to make considerable progress in terms of affordable housing. But right now, it may seem that we have a lot of rentals, but it's not enough. It's not enough. It tells in terms of the cost of rental housing, it's going up while the income is stagnating.
Getting back to community perceptions, 3 areas here that show basically demonstrating the favorable view of housing-related topics. Affordable quality housing has been declining pretty significantly, and for 18 it went down to 18% from 27. Housing options also declined for 18, down to 30% from the 43% in 16. And I don't think they asked this question in 18 because I can't find it. Progress on residents having safe and affordable housing. There is another question in here for housing. Just find it real quick that we didn't put on this slide. It's under built environment. So in terms of are you not under housing cost stress? And that actually increased slightly from 61% to 63%. So it still falls within the margin of error, but it still did go up slightly. So again, I think this demonstrates the need, that this is a very critical need in this community, relates to workforce development, relates to race and equity. It's tied to so many issues in this community right now. And so I think this demonstrates, and I know you have let me get to the initiatives. So these are in terms of the major initiatives, we obviously have a large investment in the capital budget for the next 5 years for the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority and Friendship Court. I also realize there's a HAC work session next week that you all will be discussing the housing strategy and how to push forward with that. And so there's definitely some action taking place in this area that's very positive and forward moving. So again, I think this is the one area that has a lot of momentum, and the data
I think
demonstrates
awareness
the
also
need and the
drives data
right.
too. I mean, the awareness of it alone is just people who may
Very
not even
aware,
considered it before as an issue because it doesn't affect their lives directly now
That's right.
recognize how much an issue it is for other parts of the population.
But I also want to put out there, too, that there are other initiatives that have been moving forward that are related to the production of affordable housing. And, for example, looking at the hydraulic small area plan and looking at the strategic investment area plan, the SIA plan had identified that there was a capacity of 1,700 new units in that area. Where are we in building out on that? The hydraulic plan estimated about 1,000 units could be built if we rezoned. I would like to see tracking of those other initiatives that do identify capacity. The Cherry Avenue Small Area Plan is identifying actually acreages that can be built on. And so it's a way to also understand how we're building capacity to build housing. And then the other initiative that I'm not seeing up there is the work that's been going on with the form-based code and the SIA, and they're going to be doing scenarios where they are demonstrating whether or not a height bonus can create more units as they built out an area that's equivalent to the SIA plan. So I just want to make sure we're getting a full picture of our initiatives and also a full sense of our goals that have been established by previous initiatives and how we're meeting those goals.
Okay. Makes sense. So,
Is there another question? I'm sorry, Councilor Bellamy?
No.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the last section, race and equity, and I'm starting out here with the community perceptions. Again, this is the National Citizen Survey, and the 2 data points that seem to be most relatable to this area are do residents feel like they're treated fairly and equally regardless of race or any other factor, which took a pretty sharp decline between 12 and 14, but started climbing back up in 16. And then aspect of community characteristics rated as open and accepting has actually been declining. I'm not sure if they asked the exact questions in 18. Sometimes they change things up, so I'll have to go through and find where the comparable, they always ask questions about this in the survey. They may have changed it a little bit. So I'll have to go back and I couldn't find them quickly for you. But again, when we have the 18 report out, we'll make sure we report out on that. So a lot of this information is being pulled from Opportunity Insights. So it's not really necessarily specific. It's pretty broad information in terms of household income for Black and African American families. I mean, a lot of this you already know, that while for those groups, for groups such as whites, Asians, and Hispanics, that they've actually seen an increase over a 5-year period, and I think this is from 2011 to 2016. It's actually increased, and for Black and African American groups, it's actually declined. In terms of social status in the same family within different generations, Black Americans are also having lower rates of upward mobility when you're looking at the intergenerational aspects of this. And even for specifically Black and white boys, which was mentioned in the report we provided, even living in the same neighborhood, Black boys are still, these gaps exist even when they're in the same neighborhood. And then we talked earlier about unemployment rates, that the rate for African Americans in Charlottesville is double that of white residents. So I know that you all have talked about many of these factors. We have a lot of initiatives happening right now. Here's just a few that we're listing. For instance, social services is addressing racial disproportionality in local child welfare system. You know a lot about the disproportionate minority contact initiatives that are in place. More recently is an advisory committee that Mr. Murphy formed to undertake an internal organizational equity assessment look, and Ms. Dimmock is leading that up for us, and that will be providing recommendations. And then obviously this is tied very closely to affordable housing investments, and I'd also put on their workforce development initiatives is also tied very closely to the issues of race and equity. Any questions or comments about?
Well, having said that, could we begin identifying our data with regards to both like the growing opportunity programs and our housing programs by race, so that we can understand that, you know, who are we helping with these programs? So it does mean making sure that we're identifying the household racial makeup when we're supporting housing. It does mean when we're getting people graduating from the growing opportunity programs and getting jobs. Just would like to know what the racial composition of our clients are. Just because given this stark data.
So, Council, just FYI, as part of the Affordable Housing Fund, we are requiring the sub-recipients or direct beneficiaries to provide
Okay. So you have the data?
The data, we started requiring that last year, to provide the data of the people they are serving.
So when we get this report out on the housing?
At the end of the year, when we do the report, we'll be able to tell the city council.
Great.
You know, 100 households benefited from the affordable housing fund. Of those, 60% is African American, 10%. So we've started requiring that information.
Because I know we have the immigrant population as well. So.
And the other thing I would like just to point out for council to keep in mind is we talked about work. Thanks, Chief. We talked about workforce housing. We talked about affordable housing. And then we talked about race and equity. And those three things have to do with wealth creation. But something that is missing is the transportation piece, because we didn't talk about the transportation cost burden, which has implications in terms of workforce. So going forward, you know, probably at some point, council needs to pay attention to transportation, you know, and access and convenience of transportation. Right now, I think everybody within a quarter of a mile radius has access to transportation, you know. But in terms of convenience, you know, which is whether it comes on time and things like that, you know, I think we still have a challenge. And transportation, whether it's local or regional or a combination of both, is going to be critical in terms of economic development and wealth creation, especially for low and moderate income families.
Well, thank you, Alex, because again, the Regional Transit Partnership is going to be producing reports and is going to be, because the goal for that Regional Transit Partnership, as most people know, was to expand our regional bus system, and our frequency of service is 30 minutes to an hour, which is no way is that efficient and valuable to people who need to commute to work. And plus, when we talked about manufacturing, Airport Road has manufacturing plants, but our bus system doesn't go out that far.
Mm-hmm. And actually,
So that's exactly the kind of thing that the partnership was charged to do, and we're going to be producing recommendations in the near term. And Chip Wells is in the room. I don't know if he has anything else to add to that, but he's smiling. Maybe I don't want to ruin his day. But that is another key kind of obstacle, along with childcare, to keep people that are from rising above poverty level. But thank you for bringing that up.
All right.
I think I'll just say
Oh,
this one last thing. No, it's fine. Moving the needle takes a long time. It's not something that you see overnight. And many of the programs, initiatives that we've been working on, they're relatively new. I mean, yeah, they may be, a year, 2 years, and so forth, but you don't just see that change like instantly overnight. Even to the slide before this, specifically when you were talking about outcomes for Black boys, we just got the Youth Opportunity Coordinator last year. And I'm not like making excuses, I'm just adding context. We just got the Youth Opportunity Coordinator last year, and it's going to take some time to see the changes in those outcomes. I think about the work from the 100 Black Men, like this is our 10th year, and we didn't see the decrease in the achievement gap in terms of young boys going into higher level classes until like year 4 or 5. So, I mean, it just takes a while for the data to reflect the work from the initiatives, but I'm happy at least that we're doing it and acknowledging that we still have more work to do.
So we did ask 2 new questions. I just remembered this and I found it regarding, Ms. Dimick came up with these questions for me. And the first question was, and we only have 1 data point for this, keeping that in mind, priority of addressing racial equity. So the question was, how much of a priority, if at all, do you think it should be for local government to address racial equity gaps in jobs, health, and housing? And 61% said it was a high priority. Good. And 25% a moderate priority.
Okay.
The second question, to what extent, if any, do you believe the city is making progress towards addressing racial equity gaps in jobs, health, and housing? 43% said some progress. 10% said significant, and 43% said some. So 50% believe there's significant or some progress being made in these areas, which is pretty good. But Mr. Bellamy, your point is well taken. These things do take time. So I think if we continue to ask these questions, which we'll do in another couple of years, then we can see how people feel about, and then all the other data that we've looked at prior to this, which feeds into that as well, is really important to see. Are people's lives actually changing?
Right, and we'll continue to have ideas and, pump these initiatives that we have. I mean, we'll get there.
Right.
Just stick with it.
Okay. So I'm going to finish up. I showed this slide to you last year when we set the priorities for 19, and just wanted to remind you again, everybody again, that why do we just want a few key priorities? And I think this discussion is proof of that having a few is good, having a few key ones, and you can really get into a deep discussion about each one of those. So I think that, again, is a good reason to keep the priorities a few, so that not everything is not important, but these core things are, everything is important. We get that. Everything is important, but these things are really important. And so For the 20 budget, we're suggesting you go with the same priorities as last year, adding the aspect of preparedness for safety and security. And again, if we can all agree to these today, then we'll take the feedback you provided us, looking at the strategic plan, make sure that alignment is very clearly made, refine the dashboards, which you looked at, showing alignment within the budget. We'll discuss these further when we start deliberating in March, when you have the proposed budget in front of you, and we'll of course be providing progress reports. I mentioned earlier that we're going to be starting a new strategic planning process this spring, so this will obviously feed into that as well. So that is I'm concluded with my section before we move to the actual budget. So I'll take any questions.
With workforce development, if we could have a data point that starts identifying availability of early childhood development or excellent child care. I don't know what that data point is, but if there's some way that we can begin to understand that we're addressing that issue in a community way or a government way or both, like how many slots do we have today in Charlottesville for childcare, and how many do we need? That kind of information I think would be really helpful to see, and how are we moving that needle over time, and in a way that's affordable. It's got to be affordable.
And there's a question
Yeah,
there.
the Early Education Task Force meets next Wednesday afternoon. I've already sent them an email during this meeting.
Okay.
I'm on it.
And I will say that the perception of that has actually decreased from 16 to 18 in terms of those who are rating childcare preschool positively, excellent, or good, went from 49% to 38%.
Okay.
So there's definitely some work to be done. And then when they produce something called a livability report that goes along with this. And there was a sentence I just saw, only 4 in 10 residents gave favorable marks to the availability of affordable quality childcare, which is below the average that we're benchmarked against, which, keep in mind, the benchmark we're being benchmarked against in this is all the other localities that do this. So we're not picking the benchmarks for this, they picked them for us. But it is below average of all those other localities that are in this survey tool. So I think your point is well taken. Yep. At least for this exercise, so. But we can add that.
Thank you
We
very
can
much.
figure out what that means to add
Yeah.
as a data point. Okay. So any other discussion about this or disagreement with what we're proposing?
I still have the same question about the safety, security, and if we can just get some more information about.
Sure. I think that those are great questions, so very good points to make. Okay. All right, good. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mantle to Ryan, who's going to we're going to start digging into the budget a little bit, and we're going to start out with some discussion about where we see revenues going. So I'll let him take over from here.
All right, thanks. So as Leslie said, we're going to start off with some revenue slides here, and we want to show some slides with our early estimates for FY20 on some of our major revenue sources. Again, these are still early estimates. With a lot of these sources, we really only have, because of the lag and when the payments come in, we really only have a couple months worth of data, so we're going to continue to refine these estimates as we go through and continue to watch these, and so these may go up, down, remain the same, but again, these are just preliminary estimates. I don't want anyone to think that these are set in stone at this point. So starting with meals tax, we're continuing to show growth in this area, and based on the current trends, we're projecting a 3% increase from in FY20 over the amount that was adopted in FY19. Again, we'll continue to monitor this as we continue to get more data, but right now our meals tax is at 5%, and the last time we adjusted that was in 2016, which shows the bump between 16 and 17. A lot of that was part of that was attributable to this. And just to add a little perspective, the county's rate is capped at 4%, and actually based on the FY19 adopted rates for meals tax, the city of Charlottesville ranks 32nd highest out of 38 cities, and so so right now we're in towards the bottom third in that particular category.
What was the type of cities? I'm sorry.
These were the independent cities
Independent cities. Okay.
in the state.
Okay, so that means that there are, so we're we're at the very bottom, okay. Okay.
Yeah, we're towards the bottom third, and if, if we were to go up to 1%, we'd still be, we'd raise us up to about 19.
Okay.
So we'd
That's
take a
good to
pretty
know.
significant jump, but
So
just give
where are
add some
you
perspective.
actualized through then in this graph? It seems like just a pretty
So
big, that's a
FY, we
pretty
have
big
the
jump.
actuals for FY18. We only have about 4 months worth of data on meals tax for FY20 because when the data or when the amounts are collected to when they're actually received, there's about a 2-month lag on that. So we really only have about 4 months of data. So it's still only about a quarter's worth of data for us really to look at. So like I said, as we get more data, we'll continue to do, but all of our trends have been showing positive in this area. So that's why we feel at this point, we feel comfortable with that 3%.
Does that growth look similar to when we actually did make an adjustment in the percentage in from 2016, what you're saying now?
The other thing to realize is as we went through the budget last year, we were still really uncertain on meals and sales tax,
Because
so
of the
we took a conservative approach. If we had added, we didn't want to confuse things by adding another FY19 revised column where we have some revised estimates because we continue to look at that. You would see a little bit, you wouldn't see as much of a dramatic spike because we are expecting FY19, again, this is based on 4 months worth of returns, to show growth over what we had in the budget. So it's not as dramatic of a spike, but it is still a steady increase in that area.
So, Ryan, the 19 number, the year that we're in, is still the budgeted 19 number, not
Correct.
the revised actual.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah.
So we're really somewhere in between the
Yeah.
19 and 20 number already?
Already,
Right.
yeah. So the
Based on our
levies are
projections.
Plus in that area. Yeah.
Mhm.
My years mixed up.
There's no other questions on meals. We'll move on to lodging. And again, this is continuing to show an increase on an annual basis. Our preliminary estimates are going up from about 5.1 to 5.7 over FY between 19 and 20. The main reason is continued strong performance with increased room inventory, as we talked about earlier, and continuing to see within the city the lower vacancy rates. So as the inventory goes up and the vacancy rates remain, we're still seeing good returns on this. To put this tax in perspective, same way I did with the meals tax, currently we are 20th out of 38 cities at our current rate of 7%. And if we were to raise this by 1% to go up to the 8%, this would put us tied for the 4th highest rate in the state, behind only Emporia, that's at 11%, Petersburg at 10%, and Bristol at 9%. So that would really shoot us to the top of the market on this one. And again, the county rate is capped at 5%. They would have to go to the General Assembly to have that changed, to be able to change that. And we raised this rate from 6% to 7% in as part of the FY17 budget.
Can you remind us, what is the formula that then channels some of this revenue to the CACVB?
So with this, it's a complicated formula, but it's 30% of the first 5% of the actual revenue received. So while if we were to raise this, we wouldn't see an immediate impact in the operational budget. We would see that 2 years down the road when those actuals come in, then we would have to provide a larger contribution to CACVB at that point. So like I said, while it's not immediate impact on this budget, we will still feel an operational impact on the expenditure side with this. But again, we would have to.
So if it's 800,000, how does it net out over time what the actual gain is?
I would have to do the
Okay.
math on that, but
Well, we always do this little, like we have that chart that says for every penny we get
But
this,
it
but
depends on the actuals. It's not
Okay.
based
Right.
on the budget numbers. So if you,
All right.
you could budget 800,000, but it's going to be just what you realize. So, which would be higher, obviously, because you've increased the rate. But it's hard to say how much of that 800,000
Maybe it would be helpful
would
if
be.
you looked at an actual from another year, just to let us see what does that
When we
mean?
increase the tax,
Yeah,
the year, I mean, we could do that.
just so we can
what happens.
see what happens. How much bang for the buck do we get for raising this tax? That we
went
can
to the
apply to other
CACVB,
things.
Or did we apply to other things?
That we could apply to other things and that they go to the CACVB.
and a cautionary tale that Mr. Engel has brought up related to this item is, yes, we're continuing to see new inventory come onto the market, but at some point you hit that, I don't want to call it a saturation point, but you kind of hit that plateauing point and that leveling point where the increased stock and then you start to see decreased occupancy rates. So there's that balancing act with that. So it's, that's another thing. Just because we continue to see this growth and continue to see these new rooms doesn't mean that every new room means it's going to continue to show that increase. We have to be weary of that, and that's something we look at on that monthly basis when our revenue team meets.
So one quick question, but for clarification, if we were to go up 1 cent in terms of the lodging tax, it would make us or tie us for fourth, but we would be tied with a plethora of other cities, correct?
Yeah, I did not have that number in
I know
front of
you
me,
don't-
but
yeah.
it's
It's like 13 or 14 other cities.
Yeah, somewhere
right?
in that neighborhood.
So, because I think, and not saying this is what you're doing, but I think like, if the public, when they hear like, oh man, we'll be top 4 in the state, like, yeah, technically we will be top 4 in the state, but there are several other cities,
right,
other
it's
first cities who have the same.
Double digits. I believe you're correct in
Yeah.
saying that there's double digits.
I
that
had to
would be in
restart. I can look that up shortly.
Yeah.
That would be
once I
helpful
can
because those
get-
other
Yeah.
cities you just mentioned we're ahead of, I
Yeah.
don't consider them comparable to us.
Yeah.
So I'm just struggling.
Yeah.
Right.
Like they obviously need revenue for other reasons, but I'm just trying to figure out what other.
Sure,
To
sure.
Dr. Bellamy's point, it would be
Yeah.
helpful to know who else is in that other mix.
Sure. Well, we can, we'll get that figure for
You
you.
get it? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't even know where one of them is.
Sales tax. Again, through the first 4 months in FY19, our figures are trending above what we received in FY18 by about 1%. Again, we're showing a large spike because FY19 still represents the adopted budget amount. Our revised budget amount would be slightly higher than this. So we're still, based on this positive, we're looking at about a 2% increase over what was adopted in FY19 for FY20. So we're still, at this point through the first 4 months, we're still trending in the right direction. We're continuing to see the upward trend. But as always, we're going to continue to monitor this closely as we get monthly
What are
data
some of
in.
the industries that that this would include?
Anybody that pays retail sales tax.
Yeah.
Say that again?
Anybody that pays retail sales tax.
Because I'm just saying, like, because I know the brick and mortar retail shops have been going down, but in the county, for example, the shopping malls aren't doing so great.
Right.
But we're showing some positive growth here in the city.
Yeah, I don't know what I'd have to look at the numbers to see how we compare to statewide. We're probably not doing quite as well as the rest of the state, if memory serves.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's more than just, brick and mortar retail. It's lots of people
Okay.
pay sales and use tax.
Right. Yeah.
BPOL, our business license taxes. This revenue is continuing to perform well. We're looking at estimating close to a $300,000 increase between 19 and 20. Wanted to point out FY 17 and 18 actuals are higher because of higher than expected returns from a small number of sources, and this can be a volatile tax, and so those types of returns can't be counted on every year. So while it looks like, wow, why are we projecting so much lower than what we received in 17 and 18? That's because if you looked at the budget trend, it would be more of a level line on this, but we just had some higher than expected returns. So again, as I say with all of these, we're going to continue to look at this and monitor this, and as those returns come in, we can make adjustments to these figures. So.
I have an answer on the lodging tax. So there are 16 localities currently at 8%. So we would be 17.
You said 16?
And there's only
16
3 at
others.
7% with us, and that includes Danville and Harrisonburg, and everybody else is lower than that.
Oh. So if we were, not saying this is what we're gonna do, but if we were to go up 1 cent,
We'd
we
be
would-
one of 16 or one of 17.
one of 17 cities in the state.
And a lot of those are Hampton Roads area region, which is very touristy.
Right.
Mhm. Richmond is in there, Roanoke Salem, Roanoke, so
Right.
it's I would say they're comparable in terms of their economies and
Yeah.
things, yeah.
And to a certain extent, well, I'll save that, but thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so moving on to the personal property tax. we're looking at a nice increase between FY19 and FY20 adopted budget. Mainly, this is due to increased motor vehicle stock and overall value of the vehicles within the city.
I don't like increased motor vehicle stock. I like the tax, but I don't like that stat.
Yeah, we're just seeing more cars and higher values on the cars, and so, and again, this is one where it kind of goes up and down, but based on our revised projections, 19 would be up a little bit, but not a ton, so. Finally, real estate. I want to say these are preliminary reassessment figures, are only preliminary, they are not final yet, we don't have it, so we're not.
Full disclaimer.
Full disclaimer, like, these are preliminary, the assessor is still going through the assessments, but he gives us some preliminary figures so we can have a rough estimate to kind of start to plug in. And so that's where we are with this. I believe those notices go out at the end of this, will go out at the end of this month, and we'll have more finalized figures hopefully definitely by the next work session we have with you on the 31st, we'll have some final figures on our real estate projections to get a firmer figure on this.
Well,
So what does the percentage increase kind of look like at this point between this year and last?
Mr. Cullinan, did you want to, I hesitate to say that because, like I said, they're still going through and looking at all of the
Okay.
assessments that have come in and making adjustments to all of those, so it's,
You're asking
I
about
mean,
the
Mr.
assessment increase percentage or the
Well,
revenue?
just the revenue, because you were giving us those percentage increases
sorry.
for all the
Revenue,
other
Yeah,
ones.
we can give you the
Yeah.
assessment piece.
No,
we're
not the
still-
assessment,
okay.
but what is the
Oh,
projected
sorry, I
revenue
didn't-
percentage increase?
Right, that's.
Between this year and last year?
right, no, I misunderstood. I believe that is roughly a $5 million increase, and I would have to look at the percentage, but I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 6%.
Okay,
I'll pull that up too.
thank you.
The only thing I would add to the discussion is that the numbers are being finalized, but earlier this week, the Area Association of Realtors released some of their data for both the fourth quarter of last year and for last year as a calendar year, and it indicated a robust real estate market in Charlottesville in terms of average price increase, fewer days on market, and so that the robustness reflected in those figures will be reflected in the reassessment.
Okay.
So so right now, the way it's projected, and again, this could change, so disclaimer, $5 million increase, 7.37% revenue increase, not assessment, but revenue.
Revenue
to be very
increase,
clear,
that's exactly
from
what I'm
budget
hearing.
to budget.
So across all of these categories, without us doing anything, we're seeing increases expected year over year.
We'll get
We'll get to
exactly to that point on the next slide. So, really, the point of this slide, we talked about many of these on the local taxes and the licenses and permits side, but the main point we wanted to point out on this slide was the overall change that on our preliminary estimates is looking at roughly $6 million increase from budget to budget, and that's about 3.35% over FY19 amounts. Again, there's a few things where we're seeing those large increases in the one-time revenues. Those were one-time revenues. We didn't account for those again. The city-county revenue sharing, I wanted to point out that overall, we're projecting an increase in that amount. We're still waiting for the final calculations from the county on that. But overall, we're projecting an increase, but it's going down because of the increased contribution to the capital fund. So that's why we're looking at a decrease in that portion, and then you'll see that down in the designated revenues.
So total dollars are larger, but it's where it's being allocated. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
So we're not looking at a $1.3 million decrease in the revenue sharing. It's just where it's being allocated to. That's why we have the larger portion down in the large increase in the designated revenues
Designated,
portion.
okay.
So,
Balance.
Which is the capital budget.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
so that's gonna
Wow.
kind of, unless there's any other questions on the revenues. Again, these are preliminary. We're meeting every 2 to 3 weeks right now with our revenue team to refine and finalize these estimates, and we'll have some updated figures when we get to the 31st to be able to share with you guys. And if there's no other questions, I will pass this over to.
All right, so $7 million additional. just
Six
from
million.
taxes.
Oh,
So,
whoops.
Up the top, I'm looking at taxes alone.
Sorry.
Oh.
Without doing anything different.
Sorry, I forgot about this last revenue slide. And so here is what 1 cent would generate if we increase the various taxes we have throughout the city. The point of this slide really is to show that we're going to be looking at all these strategies, nothing's off the table, but it's not to illustrate, oh, we're going to raise these taxes. It's just, here are potential strategies and potential areas that we could look at should we need to do so. But we just wanted to give you those based on and these are based on the figures that we were showing earlier, the 1 cent would be, so. So, now I will turn it over to,
Hold on, I'm sorry.
oh, yeah.
Well, never mind.
Okay.
We need to separate us like the teachers do it, the little kids.
Really?
So with that, I'll go ahead and turn this over to Chrissy to start talking about some expenditure stuff.
So as the new kid at the table, I get all the good news. So as we're still combing through the expenditures and looking at those details, there are a couple of big things that are surfacing that we did want to, I think we've talked about some in the past, but we did want to sort of put some dollars to that. The first being the employee compensation and benefits that we've been talking about. We were asked to look at what it looked like to take the living wage from the $14.40 to $15 an hour, and we know from previous conversations that looks to the employees that are in temporary positions, but also can add an impact on general employees who are in regular positions and could be making less than the proposed $15 an hour. To address that, we looked at an increase of 4.7% for general employees, and doing so ensures that any employee in the regular positions would be at a rate at least at $15. And overall, the cost to do that would be about $2.3 million. Mr. Murphy's talked to you about increasing the sworn police positions to 9%. That had a cost of about $980,000. And the one thing that's maybe not so obvious that we did also look at was with annually the city contributes to the pension fund and the pension liability. And when we do that, the assumption that we use for that is based on the participants in the plan, their current rate of pay, and any prospective raises. And we make the assumptions that we make, basically this year, some of these raises are at a rate that's a little bit higher than our assumptions. So we asked our actuary to look at what the impact of that would be on the pension liability. And in doing so, that number today, in current day dollars, was about $1.9 million.
Sorry, can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
We've talked about the performance management system. When would that start to be something that we see? And I know we've talked about it more like kind of doing the foundational work to get there, but then
review system?
yeah, when will that be something we'll start to see in a budget in dollars so that we're looking at these percentages not on a general basis, but literally based on people's performance?
We have different scenarios that could do that in this year. The question is if we're going to try and do another phase of living wage and deal with the compression all at the same time and get that to where it needs to be, whether we need to do that reset first and then, but the employee reviews that will set the foundation for that, they're occurring. So
Okay.
I think that we're in good shape either way. We have some different scenarios that say, I think you'll hear about the county, right? We talked about this at the jail board yesterday, that they're going to do a 3% increase with, I think, 2.3% general wage increase and 0.7 that is in that sort of performance pool. And so we've looked at some scenarios with different numbers that would be a blend of general wage increase and performance pool.
But this right now reflects then some support for the compression across the board.
That's what this 4.1 definitely does, yeah.
And then my second question, I know that I've brought this up with Leslie, is around us looking at a comprehensive public safety plan going forward that's sustainable. I mean, obviously, I think we recognize there's some immediate needs, but I know the county has adopted their step plan and just trying, I know that's something I know I've just asked for at some point. I think it'd be helpful for council to understand what that looks like and what, in terms of dollars and as well as what it really means.
Yeah, we have some work being done on the analysis of a step or a grade plan. That doesn't change where we are as far as lack of competitiveness in the market right now for the police department. So the number for setting that base, in my opinion, remains the same. Where we go from there, that requires a lot more discussion. And, you know, I will say that until we get to competitive place on wages, and then you've got to deal with, you know, culture and training and all these other pieces. But until we get there, it's hard to even talk about what the total compensation is. But you need to understand that our total comp, when you think about how rich our public safety retirement is because of the structure of the supplement program, I think that, you know, it's hard to talk with officers about that when they're 10% behind all their colleagues or cohorts out there in other agencies. But if you're pretty equal on pay, and then you say, look, you know, we aren't going to make these jumps because your retirement is that much better, at least then you're not talking about, hey, but I need to get fed today, you know.
So just to be clear, Mr. Murphy, that and Ms. Beauregard, Leslie and Mike, the 980K is to get us to just a comparable wage for the region, for the CPD.
That's right. So,
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But what does that do to comparable wages for fire? Like, where are we with that? I mean, I understand the county's fire department sounds like
That's
they're having
literally
struggle.
just to get police. Police are currently behind
Right.
our fire internally,
Yeah.
and that's to keep them comparable when we get to July 1.
Right, I'm just asking, do we know how, I know that a study's been done more Commonwealth-wide on fire versus fire. Would you know where we are relative to the county on fire?
I don't actually.
I don't think I can answer that today.
I did notice this, well, Chrissy brought this to my attention, it was a fire EMS in the county, and their starting pay was lower than ours, 39. Does that sound right, Andrew? No? That's what it said, though.
They just approved the grade 7.
Okay, it was curious, because I knew they had done that, so I wasn't really sure.
And I think there were additional steps for degrees as well. So there was like a starting rate and then so much more for
maybe, right, I think you're
degrees.
right, yeah. So, but I don't have the details on where we are relative to the gap.
I'm not
in
going
front
to
of me.
disagree with
Yeah.
what we need to do immediately to address this
I
immediate
will
need.
say
I'm
we
just
still
trying to
got a
look
lot of work.
comprehensively
Sure.
and how we are going to look at this moving forward on a sustainable basis.
And you and I talked the other day about this, and we still have a lot of work to do in the next 4 weeks before we get this budget done to figure out what we can afford to do and what makes sense and what we may have to phase in over time. And so, and we need to look at all these different data points that we've done and consider the public safety side, but then also what does it mean for the general population of our employees too, to make sure that that gets taken care of. So we've got a ton of work to do in the next 4 weeks and to bring something to you all as part of the budget. So it's still a work in progress, obviously. But anyway, but it is a large component of our budget right now as it stands. This may not be where it ends up, but this is kind of like, what is the scenario that could be the most costly at this time?
I think it's important. I think that I said
very-
in one of our previous meetings, I just think looking internally and putting our investment in our organization is important, I think, for long-term gains. So
And there's one other point on this too, is these dollars are citywide dollars, not necessarily just general fund. So the 4.17, the general fund would not totally be impacted by 2.3. It would be something less than that.
okay.
Oh, that makes a big difference. Where would the 980K for the police come from?
Revenues.
Increased revenue.
Well, we're still working on what that gap is.
Right.
And when we get to the 31st, we'll definitely have what that, because they're all in the general fund, all the police salaries. So that definitely affects the general fund. And if you're looking at $6 million in revenue, that's 1/6 of that right there.
Right.
And so, and that doesn't include, and we'll get to another slide where this is quite a large number right here, but then when you start looking at other aspects too of the budget, then the gap increases even further. And again, we don't have that gap number fully realized quite yet in the general fund. We'll have that, we'll talk about that more on the 31st. But right now, it's going to be funded out of the revenues that you saw earlier, unless there's a decision made to increase a revenue source, so, which is another option, obviously.
Just remember, just this slide, and this isn't where we are yet, and there's more slides to come about potential expenditures.
That's right.
This slide has a value of over $10 million. We only showed you $6 million in revenue change, so we're already in the whole $4 million before we talk about the upcoming slides.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can anyone give us a loan?
That should be in red.
We don't want to scare people. We're not scared yet, we're good.
Any other questions on the employee compensation?
It's like tracking the national deficit.
All right, so moving on, based on our last work session with the CIP as it currently stands, we talked about the fact that the general fund transfer to the CIP would increase about $108 million. And along,
1.8 million.
I'm sorry, thank you, 1.8, that's a few extra zeros there, sorry about that. And then the debt service transfer also, the current proposed CIP has the annual debt service going from 10.9 to 11.7, so that adds about an additional $850,000.
Bless you.
Thank you. Sorry, y'all.
And then finally, based on the numbers that Ryan talked to you about and where we are right now, using the formula, the schools, contribution to schools would go up 2.2 million. Although preliminary talks with them, and just based on their very preliminary numbers, we are expecting that ask to be a number that's probably $1 million to $1.5 million more than the formula would give them.
For operating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a joint work session with them on the 23rd.
I think some of us are meeting next week ahead of that.
Right, correct. So I've asked them for some details, which they're putting together. So I presume we'll be talking about that on the 23rd as well.
And then
in addition to you can ask about it, in the meeting next week.
And last year, per the budget guidelines, it was what versus what we gave them? I'm sure it was higher, but was it $1 million higher? 1.5? I don't remember.
No, we gave them $2 million. They asked for a little bit
always about
more,
$2
which we did not. So I think they asked for 2.5,
We
2.6.
compromised somewhere in the middle.
And we didn't give them their full
Right,
ask.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Okay, so these are the things that we know we've talked about. The other thing that we have not yet really talked about is the new departmental requests that have been received. Basically, we have received about $5 million in total new requests. Large portion of that are new position requests, which totaled about $4.3 million. There were 34 new positions requested in the general fund departments and 29 non-general fund positions. For new programs and equipment, we looked at the cost of those that were being requested. That was about $365,000. And then as part of the budget submission, Mr. Murphy asked departments to look at their budgets and look at the costs that preparing for events such as August 12th and other events have on the impact on their expenses. And we know right now, based on what was submitted, that that's about $339,000. So based on everything that we've talked about, I think it's fair to say that we have a sizable gap that we need to address or think about. And so some of the strategies that we will employ to deal with that was that we'll continue to look for and implement areas of efficiencies that result in cost savings. Same as before, we'll look at areas of savings that occur year over year to see if there are some permanent savings that we can achieve. And then finally, we'll look at services that can be eliminated or reduced or altered based on performance data and outcomes.
Do you have any rough estimation of what looking at these things might result in? Like how many millions?
Well, I think it's early enough. We're still trying to get to what the number is and then figure out how big or how
We'll have to
small.
figure a
we
lot
need
of
to
this
go.
out before we meet with you again. So we've got a lot of work to do the next couple of weeks.
So did the department heads submit opportunities for reductions along with the request? Or was it not looked
So
at?
sometimes we've asked them up front for that, and we stopped doing that a couple of years ago because we and we will be coming back to them now. We don't do it up front because when they're submitting their budget, it's hard to say where we are. They like to have more information about where we are citywide in terms of the budget. So now that we know we're getting very close to what that number is, then we can give them more targeted areas to look at. And so we wanted it to be we've liked it to be a more targeted approach to that discussion. Because otherwise, if it was very early in the process, it was difficult for them to figure out what to put in front of us. So we actually have a lead team meeting next week when Mr. Murphy and I will be talking about them to get that going. So we're going to definitely have to go back to the departments and have them start thinking about that.
But it's not asking them to eliminate something that they possibly need and ask for something.
I mean, it's
that
all
they
on the
need to.
table. Yes. We don't take anything off the table. It's all on right now.
I feel like
Now, whether or not we end up taking that is one thing, but every possibility needs to be put out there.
It involves not only not doing the things you saw on new requests, but possibly not doing or having all the positions we have now.
And do we get any more information about what that, the new positions request and why they're needed?
Yeah, you will see a copy of all new requests as part of the budget materials you get when we get into the budget process. Absolutely.
Yeah, as part of that, they do submit a justification as to why they're needed, so.
I feel like there's never been a year, well, I've only been on 4 years, in which there's never been a year out of the 4 years, this is year 4 for me, that we haven't seen kind of similar patterns in which there's a big gap we need to fill, but you all always come back and say, we've closed it. So I'm very
you helped do
confident.
that.
Well, we close it with some prioritization.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just saying I'm
I will say
confident.
that for the new requests, these are the most position requests I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean.
That's really high.
That's very high, 63 new positions.
That's
On top
a
of,
lot.
we have don't we have something like 970 employees?
950 about approved FTEs. And this is the first year I've seen individual departments ask for pay raises. That's typically not happened.
Oh, I'm not going to shy away from them doing that. So
I understand, and I know why they did it. I'm just saying that hasn't typically happened. So it does feel a little bit different this year in terms of the types of requests that came through the budget process. So but that's significant, the new positions that were requested. Usually it's 10 or 11, 15.
So the last couple of years, oh, go ahead, Kathy.
I mean, do we have any benchmarks to compare this to, like a per capita to employee ratio? Because I remember the county did that, and they had determined that they were very, very low, given kind of government industry standards. Do we have anything to demonstrate that ourselves?
I think the best indication of that is, if you look at the last 2 or 3 efficiency studies that the city has done over the last, 10 or 15 years, they all would say that for the service level that is expected and
Right.
what you want to deliver in this city, that we are generally considered to be pretty lean. The last efficiency study talked about adding some positions in key places. So it's difficult to compare always to other places, right? I'm not gonna pick on Brian, but I would say that we have placed a value on parks and recreation that doesn't look the same in some of the places. If we were to go out and say, well, let's go look at, I'm gonna pick on somebody, I have no idea what their Parks and Rec looks like in Williamsburg or whatever, right? So it is difficult to always benchmark that
Okay.
because you don't know what each community's value is about service delivery.
So do we have a sense we've had to, obviously every year there's hard decisions made at the department level. Have you gotten feedback on some of the things that we've had to compromise in the past and the impact that that's had on departments as we consider maybe some of the same
I will
requests
say
again?
the things we've done in the past probably haven't had much of a significant impact,
Okay.
to be honest with you.
I just don't want to make same mistakes again
Right.
if we've seen a trend there.
Typically, what we've been able to do is pick around the edges, as I like to say, and that's what we've done. And I know every year, maybe I sound like a broken record a little bit, oh, this is the year. But I just want to keep impressing on that this might be the year, that we actually have to make those harder decisions. But, you know, picking around the edges isn't going to be the thing we can do forever and ever. So I would say that there probably hasn't been a significant impact service-wise. But, because for instance, we've never had a layoff. I mean, I think that's a good indicator. So we're managing to keep our employees. We're adding employees. We've added FTEs over the past several years. Even in the wake of a budget gap, we've managed to figure out ways to add employees. Again, I'm not to be the doomsday, but you know, I'm always like this time of year. So those that know me, this is just the way it is in January. But we'll come. But again, we'll, you know. So this is still preliminary, and when we come back to you on the 31st, my hope is that, bless you, we'll have some specific strategies that we can put in front of you if we need you all to help us get this budget balanced.
And at what point do you kind of see your next window of a little bit more accuracy around what you project? When is that?
The 31st.
So we will,
Yeah.
in terms of just even projections, because every month, obviously, I realize we're actualizing, and so that data becomes more. But when do you feel like, on the 31st, you'll have real numbers?
We'll have real estate done by then.
Okay.
So some big ones will be finished by then,
Okay.
for sure. So after the 31st, we'll have about 2 weeks to actually get the budget completely balanced, which is a slide coming up. So we'll have a very short period of time after that work session to actually finish all the work, which is why it's really important to have you all focus as much as possible on what we think we need from you at that point. And we're still figuring out what we think we need from you at that point. So
I know Councilor Galvin, last year you brought up just how much the budget has grown over an 10-year period or what have you, and relative to even just the growth of the city. So I just think that's something I'm interested in looking at again.
I mean, I think Mr. Murphy's point is well taken. We have a lot of services that this community demands. And it does help me still to look at comparables from other places, just to get a better sense of to how we are relative to everybody else. And I'll dig up that article that I read last year that kind of prompted me to raise that question about our size of budget, because it was related to conversations that Albemarle County was having about how they were restoring staff because they had cut.
that's right. They did.
Considerably about 7-8 years ago, and so they were restoring staff, and that's when that whole notion of a per capita employee ratio came to mind. And I would just like to see where we are on that. And then it's also then helps us give the explanation to the community if we are going to raise any taxes this year, why that's happening. I'm not saying yet we're doing that, please.
Be clear.
But to be clear, but we do need to understand where our
That's right.
dollars are going and why.
Right. That's fair. You definitely, council needs to be able to explain justification. So that's absolutely a fair thing to say.
So I have a question. I would like an update on the chat program and the email exchange we had back in the fall about the range in the household values increasing to the mid-80s, that some of the people with the income limits were blocked out because of that. And I would like to look at what we can do with that, and then possibly consider the under $25,000 range, what that dollar amount would look like if we did 100%. Okay.
I put some, in our submission, I put in
Some number.
requests for new money for that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, we can bring that back on the 31st
Okay.
as a topic,
Okay.
for sure.
Great.
Is there anything else? So we've heard a lot. Anything else? Mayor Walker brought up something very specific to bring up on the 31st. Is there anything else you all would like to see that we haven't talked about yet specifically for the 31st that would help you all as we're finalizing this budget?
Well, became clear to me and maybe other counselors on Tuesday night, listening to the Planning Commission's discussion about the Affordable Housing Fund. And that is a discussion that I think we need to have, and it's with regards to creating some means of a sustainable funding source for the housing fund. Whether it's looking at how we dedicate a certain percentage of our new revenue like we do with the city schools, or whether it's that synthetic tax increment finance district. But I do think watching that conversation, and I left, and then I've looked at it again, and I know they went on till 1 a.m. with their other discussions. I think that I'm very interested in figuring out, or at least having the discussion about, creating a sustainable funding stream for the housing fund. Because again, the last thing that Stacy Pethy had told me before she left was that our current system of relying on the special use permits is simply not generating the revenue it needs to continue funding the programs we need to meet the demand that we have for affordable housing. And I think she said over the last decade, the money generated basically built 67 units. That's how she explained it to me. So we get clarification on that. I can send that out back to everybody. I did send it in an email. But I do think we need to have some discussion about that.
Okay, I think we can talk about that. It certainly was clear to me at the Planning Commission what their recommendation to the council is to add to the 20 pool beyond the $1.4 million that is in there. And I think that it's true that the special legislation that council had enabled here as far as development projects has not yielded as many units or cash as might have been hoped for when that was granted by the General Assembly, and that is a different part of the Affordable Housing Fund than the money that council has appropriated annually every year.
Absolutely.
So I just want to
thank you.
Put it out there for clarification. There is still the matter of what the council puts out there in revenues each year to be expended. So.
All right. Anything else specifically? And you can always think about it and send us an email too, if you come up with something over the weekend while you're snowed in.
I can't wait.
Snowed in.
It'll be fun.
Nobody getting snowed in. Don't speak
I know.
that.
Okay.
You got
I
3
won't.
daughters.
It's going to be sunny and 70 degrees on Sunday.
You like coloring books, don't you?
Alrighty.
Puzzles?
Slime.
So,
Slime, oh gosh.
to wrap this up for this morning, some important dates coming up. So by February 11th, the budget has to be balanced. That will keep us within our 30-day requirement to advertise the real estate tax rate. And so for 30 days from the public hearing on the tax rate. So February 11th is like pencils down for us, for real, for real. March 4th is the city council meeting when the city proposed operating and capital budget, and the school budget will also come before council as well. March 18th is the first budget and tax rate public hearings. There were 2 public hearings that night. April 1st is the second budget public hearing and the first reading on the budget for 20. And April 9th is the special meeting prior to the Planning Commission meeting that will adopt the budget and the tax levy, and will also adopt on one reading the personal property tax percentage, which you normally do that time of year. Budget work sessions, we have a joint meeting with the school board on the 23rd. The 31st, we'll continue to have a discussion about the 20 budget development, and then we have a series of work sessions and a community budget forum through April 4th. And then there's a link on our website. It's www.charlottesville.org/budget, which you can see all the dates. And the work session materials are also posted on there as well under FY20 budget development for anybody interested. So that is it for us. Done early.
Wow.
Thank you.
I can go home and walk my dog.
Go home and watch some soap operas
Enjoy the
now.
sunshine.
Days of Our Lives is about to come on.
Mayor Walker, did you want to invite public comment?
Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Yes,
Is there anyone here that would like to speak?
thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Come on.
Sorry about that.
He's got to catch those soaps.
I catch my story. My grandma was like, my story.
Hello.
Everyone,
Peter.
good morning. Thank you for having me here and doing this in a public setting. It's great. Hopefully I'll see a bunch of you back here next Monday night for TJPDC's Transportation Open House. It'll be a chance to get a glimpse at the regional bike ped plan and also the regional long-range transportation plan. Yeah, I have trouble remembering that acronym. It's an exciting plan, but like all of this stuff, it's in some ways quite sobering. There's a lot of work to do, truly a lot of work to do. Dr. West was talking about how it takes a while to move the needle. And just like with everything, it's going to take a really long time to get the community connected and safe the way we want it to. I was quite sobered just yesterday talking to city and county planners. It will take, at the current rate, about 25 years to execute just the top priorities. All right, it's really tough for me to go into a community and talk to kids about a connection that they're actually going to be starting to be getting old before it's done, much less like able to use it tomorrow. So we really have to accelerate implementation, and you'll see a bunch of opportunities to do that at the open house on Monday. But a way that you could set yourself up strategically to make faster progress on that is through matching for state and federal opportunities. In fact, the Daily Progress just this last week was reporting about a pretty good triumph you guys accomplished, maybe without even realizing it, on Monday, when you're able to leverage $250,000 of local money to $825,000 in total transportation spending. That's a 3-to-1 ratio. It's a phenomenal investment. And so the financial investment is only really a small piece of that. You think about what our priorities are as a locality. You guys listed economic development, workforce development, safety, affordable housing, race, and equity. Transportation investments are good for all of those things. Just as a most basic personal example, alternative transportation and recreation reduces stress, which gets in front of illness and gets people more work days and more cheddar coming home. And also, another example is that AAA estimates that a car costs about $9,000 a year to operate, right? So if we could get families either not having a car or having one fewer cars, that's like a $9,000 rent reduction, right? So it's incredibly useful. 2 budget buckets you could look to for that would be the combined, I think it's called Parkland and Trail Acquisition and Implementation, something like that. There's a little bit of money in there. You could boost that up from 250 to 500 or 750. Or staff is perpetually asking for a revenue sharing account that is just straight matching money. And the interesting thing about that is if staff doesn't use that money and doesn't bring back something like a 2 or 3-to-1 ratio, it just goes back into the general fund and you use it for other things that are other priorities. But it's a little mind-bending that it's this free money that you guys aren't even asking for it. At least ask for it. So those are my thoughts. Forgot to introduce myself. I'm Peter Krebs, but thank you and good luck.
Thanks, Peter.
Good morning, I'm Dave Redding. I'm with Eco Village Charlottesville and a member of the Seaville 100 Climate Coalition. And I'm here to speak in favor of a request that you've received a few days ago to establish a neighborhood outreach position for home weatherization at LEAP. Renters pay the utility bills but do not control insulation, the major appliances, the heating and cooling systems, and except the only thing they can do is set the thermostats. Landlords have no financial incentive to make their rental units more efficient. Charlottesville census tracks with the highest proportion of African American residents also have the lowest income. Much of the housing in this area is substandard. High energy burdens and poor housing quality then contribute to health problems. Poorly heated or cooled homes contribute to asthma, respiratory problems, heart disease, arthritis, and rheumatism. Families struggle to pay energy bills, may sacrifice nutrition, medicine, and other necessities which compound the effects of inequality. These issues are particularly acute for low-income families. Both economic justice and social justice demand that Charlottesville enlist its low-income minority houses in the 100% subsidized weatherization services that are available to qualified families in a different programs funded by the federal government and by Dominion Energy. Furthermore, the reduction in energy will contribute to reducing Charlottesville's carbon footprint and is urgently needed everywhere for the future survival of the earth as we know it. A large amount of money is available in the first year of neighborhood outreach for home weatherization in Charlottesville. $585,000 is available. Both owned homes and rental apartments and houses are eligible to be weatherized with the landlord's permission for rentals. But the grant funding for doing the weatherization work cannot be used for outreach. Given sufficient applications, LEAP and CHIP Energy Solutions have jointly committed to weatherize at least 100 Charlottesville homes of low-income residents during the first funded year, with the expectation of continuing on thereafter. The two service providers have agreed to coordinate to use the grant programs that each has access to in order to maximize the weatherization improvements made in each home. The uptake of weather services by Charlottesville low-income and minority communities has lacked badly. Participation of low-income families will be improved by hiring and training a resident from low-income neighborhood to go door to door, mainly in the low-income neighborhoods, doing outreach about the weatherization benefits available and assisting families in understanding exactly what data the application requires so that their applications will go through. If this neighborhood outreach position is approved, LEAP will hire and supervise the new neighborhood outreach staff member, and CHIP Energy Solution will train the person and provide ongoing coaching. It could be that some families who receive the weatherization services will not need to move to a better house and can happily live more healthily and comfortably in their newly weatherized home. That could reduce the amount of housing designated as substandard and needing to be replaced. The savings in their energy bill will make weatherized homes more affordable. The grant funding available to do the weatherization work are a whopping 15 times the amount to fund the outreach position. So the smart opportunity is to invest in improving the lives of Charlottesville's underserved, low-income families. It's the right thing to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So to that point,
Can I speak to that for a second? I've been in contact with Susan Elliott, and we're going to be helping her with some outreach on that.
Good.
Putting her in touch with some of the folks that apply from our rent and real estate relief programs.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been talking about it.
Okay, good. Well, we could eventually it would mean you wouldn't have to do so much substandard house, get rid of the substandard house.
So
Yes.
to that point, colleagues, I sent you all an email earlier this morning in response to Ms. Marsh's email, similar to what was just stated in regards to this position. I know that we've seen an uptick in requests for positions and whatnot, but I do think this is one that we should include in the discussion to a certain extent. And by and large, in my opinion, this is also an equity issue. And when we look at economic drivers and just having more money in the homes of individuals who may need it the most, if you can significantly cut down your electric bill or your energy bill, those are more dollars that you can use for a variety of other things to help your families and so forth. So I would love for us to have this discussion. I think it's a very valiant effort, to say the least.
Sure, thank you. And the studies have done that show that low-income people pay 3 times more for their utilities because they have drafty windows and everything's bad in their houses.
Yeah.
And
well, not everything, but
well,
yeah, there's some.
But what kind of campaign was put out? Because I know LEAP has been doing this for years, and so money for the position versus money for the actual work, and how can we get the information to the homeowners in a more effective way through some kind of media campaign?
well, and I think you also have to have somebody who's local to the neighborhood. Not somebody, that.
Yeah, you're saying the individual who's in the position, it being someone from the neighborhood who already has the relationships, the connections.
But I think
whatnot.
we
I
have
see your point as well.
an education gap, in terms of people receiving the information from the city about the services or from the organizations. And I understand that outreach coordinator may help with that, but is there a better way for us to get the information? There's probably the mic.
But you need to go to the
No, I'm
microphone.
saying if you go to the mic.
That is a good point, but that could be done in addition to hiring an outreach coordinator. I think it needs the personal touch. Go ahead, Marcia.
Totally agree with that, because we have an example of the KEEM program that used exactly the neighborhood outreach. So we know this works, but there is money in the Ridge West for developing materials, and I agree with you completely that outreach on paper will be helpful. I just don't think it's enough. That's my opinion. That from the history in Charlottesville of getting people signed up, it does not seem like just saying, oh, this is available is enough.
But when I talk to people, and I think, this is just something we have to do, I think, a better job as a city. People don't know that it exists, right? So I think what you're saying in terms of how that connection can happen to individuals who might qualify, and if we can talk to Brian Willer about what some kind of city ad campaign or something could potentially look like. And then we're talking about a majority of the funding actually going to make sure that these, the needs for the housing, the individual housings can actually happen.
We haven't gone into the grant funding particulars, but the majority of the money and services is really for low-income families. If you're a senior, there's some help available from Dominion, but the more effective program, the program that will do more for you, is the federal, and that is for low-income people. So that's why focusing the outreach, and with beautiful work that the city has done on identifying where low-income families are living, it's no problem really to go to those neighborhoods and do the outreach in a very focused way.
Thank you.
Does that help? Does that help, Mayor?
Yeah, I'm gonna, explore it a little bit more.
Yeah, Mayor Walker, we'll have staff from Commissioner's office and from the environmental office and the communications office get together and give council some ideas. What I'm hearing is when you think about possibly getting 100 families enrolled in the program, there's a unit cost question here. Should we spend $459 for every person that we get signed up? Because that's what I'm reading in the budget that Ms. Geyer presented to council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor Walker, I have a comment, if I may. In reflecting upon the conversation we've just had, and we have a little bit more time, especially what Mr. Akefana has brought up with regards to transportation, and then what Mr. Krebs has brought up just recently about with regards to alternative modes of transportation. When I look at our budget priorities from last year, it's not clear at all that alternative transportation choice is an integral part of those priorities. And I would like to underscore that, whether it's making that a separate budget priority or saying that it's something that is reflected in all of these priorities from last year. But when you look at our strategic plan goals, providing alternative transportation choice for goal 1, it does enhance financial health. Goal 2, it connects our community to more effective resources. Number 3, it provides variety of transportation and it's responsible stewards of the natural resources. Goal 4, it's attractive to our diverse workforce. And number 5, it's effective government because it does force the issue of leveraging local dollars to secure state and federal dollars. So I would like to underscore alternative transportation choice as a budget priority moving forward. It's clean if it's a separate item, but at the very least, it needs to be something that's couched in one or multiple of the priorities that we already have from fiscal year 19.
Hi, I'm Elaine Poon. I'm with the Legal Aid Justice Center, and I just wanted to try to be really brief. I wanted to first commend the news that you all are doing an internal equity assessment in the city. I think that's really important. And I kind of just want to piggyback off of that idea, right? Actually, Councilor Galvin just demonstrated what that could look like, right? When you look at your budget, which is that everything you do should go through an equity lens. What does that mean? It means that I look at your slide number 27 and I look at, your main priorities. Well, rather than putting race and equity in a separate category, why don't we put everything else under that category, right? When we look at economic development, your decisions are not going to be neutral, right? So economic and workforce development, you make a choice. I heard that Councilor Signer mentioned something about giving tax credits to certain kinds of industries versus, when you give one here, you may lose out on another one, right? And so thinking about that, thinking about the fact that CRHA is introducing a Section 3 program that will employ public housing residents in the construction of public housing. Those are the kinds of things that you want to be looking at when you're saying, what is economic development? What is workforce development in our city? Safety and security, piggybacking off of Mayor Walker, where do we prioritize, and where do we, be leaner and meaner and all of these different kind of options? And, are we looking at disproportionate contacts at the same time as looking at funding for, different areas of funding? And then, of course, what I always have to talk about, which is we noticed that the $50 million bond that we requested for affordable housing is not included in this presentation. We also recently went to the CIP presentation and saw that that was not quite enough or not what CRHA asked for when it comes to funding. And for the Affordable Housing Fund, we almost accidentally zeroed it out, the CAF, you know, and so I just want to remind everyone again that affordable housing is a race and equity issue. You know, Emily was actually pointing out, you know, the community perception slide that we saw. And that's, you know, kind of piggybacking after Councillor Hill, when we talk about why these perceptions might exist, right? You know, when it comes to housing and thinking about, oh, these raw numbers mean one thing, we haven't tracked how many people have been pushed out of this city because they can't afford to live here. So we might have certain numbers in terms of who's cost burdened, but we're not counting the people in the past year, like from 2011 until now, right? Rents have increased by 45%, I want to say, the average rent in this town. And so that means that people they're still commuting here to work, but they live outside of the city because they've been pushed out. So I think that thinking about, you know, of course, funding the production of affordable housing, also the tax relief funds as well as the rent relief funds should be a high priority, and they are related to race and equity.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned.